Okay, I think we're live now. So, my name is Caitlin, if you guys don't already know me. I'm the founder of Entheozen, and basically my mission with the company is to promote, information that will empower people to achieve optimal mental wellness and vitality. And one of the big topics that I'm super just obsessed about is the microbiome and the gut-brain connection. So I'm not sure if I have any listeners live right now, but I'm sure there will be plenty of people to watch this later. And so if you've heard of the gut-brain connection and that whole field of research that's exploding right now, give this video a like just to see how crazy popular it's become. And we can see an influx of likes fly across the screen. One thing I want to talk about is the role of gut health, specifically the microbiome, in mental wellness and mental illness. Now, the microbiome is basically this collective ecosystem of microorganisms that live in our GI tract. And actually not just in our GI tract. We're finding that we have microbiomes in our mouths, in women's vaginas, in our lungs even. So we're realizing that most of the cells and DNA in our body isn't actually ours. I think there's something like 10 trillion microbes, which is, I think, about 10 times the amount of human cell information. So it really starts to beg the question of what really is the self, if so much of who we are is actually these other organisms. So not to get too deep and philosophical there, but I want to talk a little bit about how the microbial ecosystem affects brain health and thus mental health. So there is this two-way axis, the gut-brain axis. It's a two-way communication street between the brain and the gut. Now, the gut is the largest lymphatic organ in the body. About 70% of the immune system lies in the gut, and approximately 25% of cells in your gut have some immune function. So when it comes to, like autoimmune conditions or inflammatory conditions, the gut is pretty darn important because that's where a lot of the immune system lies. And so we have all these little creatures. We have bacteria, we have fungi, we have archaea, viruses, and even parasites. And they're all living in this environment in a certain proportion that is either sustainable and balanced or a little bit chaotic. It's a lot like the type of ecosystem you would see on like the African Sahara plains. And these little microbes, they play such a crucial role in our overall health and especially our brain health. So a lot of them actually dictate like our mood and our state of happiness and our state of disease and health. And some of them, are responsible for protecting the lining of the gut, while others actually are detrimental and destroy the gut lining and increase the permeability of that protective barrier, separating, all the food that you take in to the rest of your body. So they play a pretty big role. Also, a lot of these bugs are producing a majority of your neurotransmitters, such as serotonin and dopamine. So about 80% of your serotonin is produced in the gut by these, strains of bacteria. And also about 80% of our serotonin receptors are in the gut. It was actually originally discovered in the gut and then later discovered in the brain as a neurotransmitter. So these microbes, they will, secrete certain enzyme byproducts that help convert, certain chemical reactions such as, taking glutamate and converting it into GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Specific strains of microbes will be responsible for that reaction. A lot of them help you process nutrients in food that you otherwise normally wouldn't be able to absorb at all. They help utilize nutrients by breaking them down in forms that your body can actually absorb. For example, cellulose, which is a component of a lot of plants that we eat, we can't actually digest cellulose, but the microbes in our gut can. So they play a very important role in how we digest food, how we absorb nutrients. And of course, if you are nutritionally deficient, shit starts to go wrong, right? Because if you don't have bricks, you can't build a brick wall, and the body relies on these, micro and macronutrients to keep cells repaired and maintained and be able to handle the stress of any sort of pathogenic attack or injury of that sort. So what can happen is microbes and microbial populations can become quite imbalanced. And, in this day and age where antibiotic use is a huge problem, we're overusing antibiotics, we're feeding it to livestock that we're eating, and that is just wiping out our microbiome and creating opportunity for the overgrowth of specific organisms and strains. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about, candida overgrowth, which, is a type of yeast. And this is actually a huge problem lately. Everybody's got candida overgrowth and various sorts of gut overgrowths in general. And so in addition to antibiotics being a huge, contributing factor, we also have a number of toxic stressors on us. We are, being bombarded by toxic chemicals on a regular basis, which is compromising our body's immune system, and it's creating an environment that's inflamed and supports the proliferation of certain strains of microbes. Now, the brain can actually affect the gut as well. Like I said, it's a two-way street. So if you're under a tremendous amount of psychological stress, emotional distress, grief, whatever, the brain can actually send signals down to the gut which will dictate that environment. It'll influence how the gut environment is being cultivated or maintained, which will influence who lives there more or less. So if you're under chronic stress, say you have a shitty job and every day you go to work and you're tired and you're under a lot of stress, and your brain is sending signals to your gut and creating this environment that is basically supporting the overgrowth of a certain strain of microbe or, candida or whatever, it just provides ample opportunity for somebody to just come along and dominate. It's, over-colonize. And it's interesting because sometimes the gut bacteria that has overgrown, it actually belongs there. Like, it's mostly in a lot of people's gut environments, but at a certain level. And so some organisms that can become overgrown, they're actually considered beneficial bacteria at a certain state, when they're at a certain population in a certain sort of balanced ecology. But then when they start to grow to a certain level and over-dominate or push out other beneficial bacteria that are also important for extracting nutrients or making neurotransmitter, then they become what you would consider a pathogenic infection. And so when people have these microbial imbalances that go on for a long time, it can be considered a chronic infection, and that puts significant stress on the body. And this is really the seat of where autoimmunity starts. It starts in the gut with an imbalanced microbiome that's putting a significant stressor on the person's immune system and body. And as I mentioned before, some of these these microbial imbalances can, cause increased permeability of intestinal barrier and affect the blood-brain barrier, so that, molecules and toxins and even organisms that would normally not be able to pass through these barriers are now just going straight into the bloodstream or straight into the brain and fucking a lot of shit up. And that's how this all relates to mental illness and mental wellness, is that the microbiome, it dictates the nutrients that are being absorbed to supply the brain with whatever it needs to maintain itself. It dictates whether the blood-brain barrier is intact. It dictates the level of inflammation going on in the body. Some of these microbes, they actually produce inflammatory byproducts, which go into the bloodstream and, straight into the brain and cause this immune inflammatory response. And we, like I said, we do find that stress is a contributing factor to this as well. And so a lot of people with mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, they found significant links to, chronic infections and imbalances in the microbiome, or, food sensitivities, which can also result from the microbiome being imbalanced because, again, there's these molecules kind of just going straight through the leaky, gut barrier and into the bloodstream, and the body is launching an immune response as a result, because all it knows is that that shit doesn't belong there, and it becomes very confused. The immune system becomes very confused about who is friend, who is foe, and that's when you start getting healthy tissue attacked. And that is kind of the origins of a lot of these mental illnesses, in my opinion, because the brain is the first thing to be, affected by this chronic inflammatory response in the body that can occur from a microbial imbalance. The brain is largely composed of fats, and it's just super susceptible to oxidative stress, which is ultimately what happens when you have, all this rampant inflammation in the body because of these chronic infections in the gut. So, if you have brain fog, or you're having gut problems, digestive problems, food sensitivities, irritability, or excessive tiredness, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder, or personality disorder, any sort of neurological or brain-based illness, you might want to consider, having a microbiome ecology stool sample taken and analyzing your microbiome state and how healthy and balanced it is. Because, like I said, the health of the entire body is really seated in the gut. And these microbes, they're really tricky. They're actually very intelligent in their own way, and they have figured out how to reward us for eating what they like. And a lot of times, they like sugar and starches. At least the certain microbes that we're seeing that are really overgrowing significantly in people. Again, antibiotics play a role, and all these toxic assaults. But a big part of it, too, is the increase in sugar and carbohydrate load that people have in their diets. And these guys just, eat it up. They're like, yeah, we love this shit. And then next thing you know, they're growing out of control because you just keep feeding them sugar. And they are going to make sure that you continue to feed them what they want to eat. And so they've actually developed mechanisms that release neurotransmitter and such as dopamine, and they reward your brain for feeding them the food that they want to eat. And when you try to cut out that food, they fight really hard to make sure that you don't do that. And they create all these cravings and drive for you to seek out whatever food that they are interested in eating, for their own benefit. They're kind of bullies in a way. So what can you do if you have a microbiome imbalance or overgrowth? Well, I'm actually going to talk more about that next time I do a live feed video. I got to keep you guys hanging on the edge, just to keep you coming back for more. But also I don't want to talk too much. I want to make sure that these are somewhat short and digestible. Digestible, get it? So next week, please tune in. I'll do another video and I'll talk a little bit more about what to do as far as rebuilding the microbiome and extinguishing these microbial overgrowths that have happened. And also, if you know somebody that is interested in this topic, please tag them in the comments so that they'll be able to see this video and hopefully get something out of it. And I also want to hear from you guys, since I'm pretty new to this live stream video thing, and I would like to continue to do more because I have lots of fun information that I love to share and just spread. Please comment on what type of topics that you find interesting or that you would want me to make a short video about. Some things that I have brewing that I'll address later are things like the ketogenic diet, or certain compounds in foods that are healthy for us, such as sulforaphane from broccoli sprouts, or anthocyanins from blueberries. I'll probably talk about some mindfulness or meditation practices, such as float tanks. I'll talk a bit about combo frog medicine and psychedelics and all those awesome tools that we have for just achieving mental wellness and peace in our lives. But if there's something that is particularly interesting to you, please comment on it and share this video with your friends that are interested. And just keep tuning in, because I want to keep sharing awesome information with you guys so you can be the best version of yourselves possible. Are there any comments, Travis, on here?
Not as of now.
Okay. All right, you guys. Well, this is live right now, but obviously many people will watch it later after it's not live. So feel free to leave a comment in whenever you watch this, and I would be happy to re-engage with you guys afterwards at your convenience. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you guys later. Bye. I don't know if that was